We are live.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, yes, we're live. How are you, Chris?
I'm good, thank you, Bellini. Good evening. Hello, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. If you are joining us, hi. So,
Same problem.
hi, everyone. If you're joining our session today, welcome again to another episode of Ask the Coach. And it's Velani from Narara Consulting and Chris Elfin from Breadfoot Consulting. We are brought to you live through Espresso. And we'll be doing these sessions every Tuesdays and Thursdays, 5 p.m. in the evening. Ask the Coach is a section in the Espresso magazine that features communication between business and the coach. So it's pretty much what we're doing today and what we've done in the last two episodes. So we'll be going through another topic to discuss today. And if you are watching, so most of the topics that we're
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I think we seem to have lost Bellini there for a little bit. The last time we were talking a lot about mindsets and the way we think. And I think that Bellini is coming back. I hope she is. I can see her name, but I haven't seen her picture. Oh, there she is. Welcome back.
Oh, goodness.
Hello.
This is crazy. Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So I was just gonna summarize what we discussed in our last session. So we've discussed maintaining a positive mindset through any situation. We've touched on sustainability, and sustainability is the ability to continue through a situation or disaster. And we've also touched on planning. We acknowledge that there are institutions that are in place which help businesses plan to sustain their business in any disaster. And we also touched on confidence, being resilient, and we've identified some of the activities that we can focus on to keep our mindset, to maintain our positive mindset, right? So that was what we discussed in our last episode. And today we are moving on to discussing topics on our emotions, how to manage our emotions and help others manage their emotions in a difficult time like this. Are you hearing me fine, Chris?
I am. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So that's the topic for today. And if you're following our topics that we're discussing, it's a chronological topic that we are discussing. We've discussed the mindset, and in order to control our emotions, we have to have a strong mindset, right, Chris? So
We do indeed. Yeah.
yes. Exactly. So today we'll be talking about how we can manage our emotions. And Chris, if you can start off our conversation, and I'll, if this connection permits, we'll continue the conversation together. Thank you. I'll leave it over to you.
Okay. And hopefully, if anyone's got any comments, they can put them in on the chat, and I can try and respond to them. So I'm going to talk about three things. All begin with the letter E. Emotions, first of all, and then a word called empathy, and then a phrase called emotional intelligence. So we'll start with talking about emotions. And some of you might be listening to this and thinking, well, what on earth has emotion got to do with business? And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But let's be clear what we're talking about. What are our emotions? Emotions are our feelings. They're what we feel. We don't get qualifications in them. We don't go and buy them in the market. They're inside us. We can have lots of discussion about where they come from. And that maybe is a discussion for another time. But we all have them. And if you just start to imagine the number of emotions that you go through in a day, you know, there'll be times when you get angry. There'll be times when you're happy. There'll be times when you're a bit jealous. There'll be times when you're a bit worried. There'll be times when you get a bit upset, and so on. At the moment, the world is a really emotional place, isn't it? Let's face it, yeah? And we're all living in an environment where we don't know the outcome. And of course, that makes us all very anxious, and that's a huge emotion. Oh, and I think you've only got to look at what's happening in Eastern Europe, and there's a huge outpouring of emotions there, unfortunately, in a very negative way. So emotions they belong to all of us. There's a very old quote. I can't quite remember the whole quote, but it says something like, rule your emotions in case they rule you. In other words, with emotions, we have a choice. We can choose to control them and try and do something about them. And you, Velini, talked about managing them, which is what we're going to talk about. Or we can let them control us. So I'm not a very good watcher of television, but apparently there was it the Oscars or something on the TV on yesterday, and one of the persons who got an award hit somebody else, slapped him around the face. It's been all over the news all day long. That's an outpouring of emotion. If you see someone who's angry and they hit out, that's an emotional response. Now, that's a response from somebody who can't manage their emotions. Their emotions are controlling them. Does that make sense, Velini? Yeah? It's this difference between... This is not a discussion about whether we should have emotions or not. It's about saying that we do have them. What we have to learn is how we manage them and how we react to them. And before I go on to the other E's, I just want to say that in business, you know, as I said earlier on, you might say, well, what's this got to do with business? But business is full of emotion. Everything we do in business is emotional. Yeah, we have relationships with customers. We have relationships with staff. We have relationships with suppliers. We have times when people don't pay their bills on time. We have times when the ship doesn't arrive and our goods are held up at the customs, and so on. And these are all emotional things. So business is an emotional place. You know, you might think that business isn't emotion. It's all about money, but money is pretty emotional. Money causes more emotional upsets probably than lots of things in the world. So business is full of emotion. And in our training, we talk about in business being important to have goals, to have a vision that you're aspiring to as an entrepreneur, as a business woman or man. And that's emotional, yeah? Because very often those goals are to do with our lives, our families, what we want for ourselves, what we want for our loved ones, and they're all emotional. So emotions are part of business life. They're obviously part of our social and community life, but they're very much part of business. So part of my message today is we have a choice around emotions. We can let them control us. So, for example, we might feel the emotion of being very nervous when we meet somebody for the first time. And we might find that we find it quite difficult because we feel very nervous. That's an emotional reaction. We have a choice. Do we want to try and control that so we learn not to be nervous, or do we just give in and say, oh no, every time I meet someone new I go to pieces, I'm hopeless, I'm terrible? Or do we say, no, I'm going to do something about it? And that's what this session's about. And the third E, the emotional intelligence, is a process of what we can do. So that's my first E. Emotions are part of life. We all have them. There are hundreds of them. They are part of business. Our goal is to understand our emotions well enough to try to control them. So when we feel angry, we understand what we're feeling, so we control that anger, so we don't hit out, we don't act in an aggressive way, we find another way to express that feeling. When we're feeling upset by somebody, we learn how to control that so we can have a conversation with someone about it, rather than just never talking to them again or being aggressive. So that's the first E. Bellini, emotion. I'm going to go on to the second E in a minute. Would you like to come in? Has there anybody sent us any comments?
Emotion, yes.
Anything you want to say?
There's no comments regarding the emotions, but I'd like to contribute if my network permits. Yes.
Yes, go on.
Emotions.
Go for it, quick.
Like we discussed probably I think in the first episode. Yes, we talked about. Thank you. We talked about being reacting to the situation. We talked about the reactions that emotionally we are all, like you said, we all have these emotions in us, and when a pandemic or a disaster strikes us, we all have different emotions towards it, and then cognitively we will get to understand. We have to understand we have to be aware of the emotions that we are reflecting. We are reflecting due to the situation that we go through. So it strongly influences our perception, our decision making, and it strongly influences that. So it's very
absolutely. Oh, I've lost Fellini again. Never mind, we keep going. So I experience emotions as we're going through dealing with the technology. But what Bellini was talking about goes back to what we said at the beginning around being proactive and reactive. We said that right in the first session, yes? They're emotional responses. You have an argument with someone, you react. Okay, Bellini, back to you.
I'm afraid this connection will not let me continue, but that's exactly I wanted to contribute to. Can you hear me?
Yep. I can. I can hear you.
Chris, can you still hear me?
Yes. I can, yeah.
Hello?
Can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Keep going.
Okay. Sorry, if you can just continue on network break.
Okay. Shall I keep going?
Yes, so that's what I wanted to touch on emotions, and it links to the mindset. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Okay. It is. As human beings, we're emotional creatures. So we have to learn how to manage all this. So the second E is this word empathy. I'm sure the word empathy is familiar to some of you listening and watching. Empathy, there's lots and lots of definitions on Google. A very simple one that I like using is you put yourself in the shoes of others. In other words, try to imagine how someone else is feeling. So if you are at work and you're dealing with, say, a customer who is a little bit angry, you have a choice when you're dealing with that customer. You can react to that customer and get angry yourself, or you can be very passive and just let the customer be angry with you, or you can try to empathize. You can try to understand what is it that they're feeling. Yeah, maybe they're angry, nothing to do with you. Maybe they're angry because the bus was late, or it was pouring with rain, or because they've come several times and they haven't got what they needed, or they're frightened because of COVID. The world has got a lot of angry people in it at the moment, but a lot of that anger comes from fear. It comes from a fear of the unknown. Yeah, we just don't know. So empathy is our ability to try to put ourselves in the shoes of others. Try to understand the other person before we have a communication. Now you can practice this. This is really relevant in the way you relate to your kids, to your loved ones, to people around you. Yeah. I mean, so much domestic anger comes from a lack of empathy. It comes from a lack of understanding from one side or the other. And it results in an outpouring of emotion which is reactive, which hasn't been proactive. So how do we create empathy? I mean, it's a funny phrase, isn't it? Put yourself in the shoes of others. You can't physically do that. So what can you do to actually become more empathetic? The way I approach this is to say we've got two eyes, so we can look, we can observe. We've got two ears, so we can hear, we can see what's going on. And we've got one mouth. Now we can use that mouth to ask questions. But apart from that, we should learn to keep it shut. If we want to be proactive, we've got to observe, we've got to listen, we've got to show interest, we've got to imagine. You know, if you have, go back to my example of dealing with an angry customer. You know, you've got a customer in front of you and they've maybe traveled by bus for an hour. Imagine what they are feeling like. It doesn't matter whether you agree with them or not. Just try to imagine what they're feeling like, yeah? And they're probably feeling not very happy. So if we can start to understand that, then maybe we can deal with them in a different way than if we just get very reactive and start to get drawn into the fact that they're angry. Valini, does that make sense? Can you hear all this? I can't hear you. No sound.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there you go.
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes. Yes.
Great.
Any comment you want to make on empathy?
So how empathy, yes. So Chris, can you talk around empathy on the current situation that we're in now? Can you give an example of empathy during this crisis that we're going through now?
Okay. That's just a little question, yes. I think for me, I think the main thing is we are all in the same crisis. So the first use of empathy is to recognize that everybody is going through similar feelings. Now, they may be expressing them and feeling them a little bit different, yeah? But basically, we are all in an unknown world. We don't know when our borders are going to open. We don't know when our loved ones are going to come back from seasonal work. We don't know whether we're going to get our jobs back, or whether there's going to be employment. And we're all in that situation. So that unleashes a lot of feelings. So I guess the first thing of empathy for me at the moment is to realize that we are in the same position as everyone else. So be careful if you get drawn into arguments on social media where we start to argue with other people about this and that and the other. Maybe we do have different views about things, but actually we're experiencing the same stuff. I think one of the difficulties at the moment with COVID, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, when a cyclone comes, a cyclone causes problems as well, of course, yeah? But in some ways, a cyclone is much better known to us. Yeah? We are more experienced with cyclones. We have them every year. We understand them. They still frighten us, but we understand them. With COVID, we don't, and that's one of the big issues. We're dealing with a situation where it's unknown. So fear is a huge emotion. So back to Velini's point about an example, if we understand that everyone is frightened, then maybe we start to talk to people in that way. Yeah, maybe we say, look, I'm frightened as well. I don't know the answer either. Maybe what we can do is help each other. Maybe by sitting down and talking together rather than arguing with each other, we can come to a solution. One of the things I find difficult politically, I'm not just talking about the government here, but generally, is politics tends to polarize. So people start to argue. But actually, wouldn't it be fantastic if they could actually all get their heads together and say, we are all affected by this one thing called COVID. Let's forget our political differences. Let's find a way, for the sake of all of us, the whole nation, to find a solution. Because what that would do would be to start to unleash our positive emotions. That would start to encourage people to stop. I think, anyway, personally, it would encourage people to stop being too negative, because we can ask people, well, what would you do? What could we do to improve the services we have in our health service or whatever? What can we do together? Not who's to blame. We talked a bit about this last week, didn't we? About the negative mindset is always about finding someone to blame.
Yes,
so basically,
yes,
we did. I mean, empathy is about thinking about the other person, the other people. And back to your question, Velini, I think now we are all in the same situation. So maybe now's the time to start thinking about each other, and thinking about, well, what is it we can all do that gives us the opportunity to find a way through this together? because the reality is none of us know the answer. We don't. Let's stop pretending if we think we do, because we don't. But if we work, I firmly believe that if we work together, we will find the answer. And I think if you look through history, there are lots of examples of problems that have been solved by people working together. They don't get solved by people arguing with each other. And the starting point is empathy. Over to you for a bit. Then I've got one more E to go.
Okay, thank you. As I was listening to you discussing the empathy, there's also something that you know, our emotions. Our emotions, they influence our beliefs. Our emotions influence our beliefs. Are you hearing me fine?
Yes, I am. Yes.
So our emotions are influencing our beliefs, and if and to come to the belief of being a Christian, in a Christian belief, I believe that emotions are in play as well. To say that, okay, we're all going through this crisis and this pandemic, and everybody is like, you know, people are frightened of the situation, and there's a lot of other emotions to it. But when we are Christians, we tend to have that emotion, like we have that trust, that when we put our trust, like just pray about things and stuff like that, it also helps. It also helps in what we say, that our emotions is strongly influenced by our beliefs as well, right? So
yes.
In a way, it helps us through the situation to say that even if we are going through a hard time, but emotionally we are okay because we believe that this will be over soon.
Okay, poor old Bellini is suffering a lot from network there. I think the last part is really important. Things do pass. Yeah, we know that. COVID will pass. Cyclones pass, they go. But of course, they're going to be replaced by something else. So what this session is really about is how do we learn to become stronger? And I think what I take from what Bellini is saying is that, I mean, people do have different beliefs, don't they? In the world, people share different beliefs. And for me, one of the exciting things about the world is that we do believe different things. But actually, as we share those beliefs, that makes the world a stronger place for me. You know, but we can only do that in a way where we have empathy. And there are certain parts of the world where people are not free to share their beliefs. There are certain parts of the world where young women are not free to go to education, and so on. Yeah, and they are not free to express their feelings. So, aren't we fortunate that we are? And isn't that great? Yeah. And I do see all this to be doing with business. Because quite honestly, I prefer to do business with businesses that have values. I prefer to actually do business with other businesses that believe. Sorry, Bellini, go on. Go on.
No, I was just agreeing to you that we are very fortunate to be, you know, to be freely free in thinking and free in participating.
Carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just agreeing to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just agreeing to you on the freedom part to do things, and we're free to share our thoughts and everything. So it puts us in a good place.
It does. And that's a very positive comment, yeah? It's a very positive thought at this time when there's lots of negative thoughts around. You know, and you've only got to look on social media, there's lots and lots of negative thoughts. But what you just said there, it can put us in a good place. Okay, so the last E of this evening, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday. We started by talking about emotions and what they are, and we all have them, and that they are actually important. We then went on to talk about how we can understand and help each other by using this notion of empathy. The third E is what I call emotional intelligence. Now, when I was a kid, I went to school, and I was never very good at school, but I used to take examinations, and I would get marks and grades and certificates, and that would measure my intelligence. And that still happens, doesn't it, in school? Yes. And people go off and they get their qualifications and their master's degrees, and that is measuring what they know. What it doesn't do is it has nothing at all to do with our emotions. It has nothing at all to do with our behaviors. So I could have a master's degree in business and be absolutely terrible at running a business, because I could have lots of knowledge about a business, but actually not have any of the behaviors I need to work with people, because business is about people. And emotional intelligence is our ability to understand our emotions, first of all. The minute we understand them, we can then start to do something about them, to manage them. So in my experience, I don't know if you agree, Velini, I see a lot of people in the Pacific have the emotion of shyness, lack of confidence, yeah? A lot of people will find it quite difficult in a group of new people to speak up. And they might sit there and be quiet. That's an emotional reaction. Yeah. Now, emotional intelligence starts by saying, okay, when I'm in a group, I'm not very good at speaking out. I need to do something about that, because I want to be more confident in that group, because I've got something to say. Now then, what am I going to do? How am I going to manage that? So maybe it means that next time I go to a meeting, I make sure I take a friend with me. I make sure that I go and sit near the front. I make sure that I write some notes beforehand. In other words, I prepare myself to manage my emotion. When you go into an examination at school or university or whatever, you prepare, don't you? You prepare yourself for the questions. You prepare yourself to deal with whatever you're going to get asked through that examination. Emotional intelligence is about doing exactly the same thing, except with our emotions. So it goes right the way back to the beginning of this discussion about it's a tool to help us control our emotions. So if we know, for example, that certain conversations make us angry, if we know that about ourselves, yeah, this is not a criticism that I get angry, but if I know it about myself, I can start to manage it. I can start to do something about that. I can say to myself, okay, I know that when I'm having these particular discussions, I find it quite difficult. So I need to think a little bit. I need to try and understand a different reaction, a different way. I might know that I'm not very good at dealing with finances at work. So I have an emotional reaction. I don't like filling in the VAT form or whatever. So I have an emotional reaction to that. So that's the reactive emotion. If I learn, okay, I'm not very good at this. I don't like doing it. So what am I going to do? How do I manage that emotion so that I fill the forms in? So this is about managing our emotions, and we can learn to do that in exactly the same way that we can learn to ride a bicycle, or that we can learn to cook, bake a cake. We can learn to do anything. We can learn to manage our emotions. And my argument will be that your business will be stronger for that, because you will always have to deal with situations you don't like. Angry customers, COVID, cyclone. The stronger we've got around our emotions, the more able we are to manage all of this. So emotional intelligence for me is about being aware of our emotions, of myself first, and then of others. And this is where the word empathy comes in. As I said earlier on, empathy, how do I do that? I do it by talking. Sorry, I don't do it by talking. I do it by listening. I do it by watching, by hearing, by seeing the way other people are. So I become aware of my emotions. When I become aware of them, then I can start to do something about them. You know, problem solving is really important. You know, and solving problems in business is an emotional activity. It really is, yeah? Working with other people to solve, you may have a problem in business. Your problem may be that you are losing money. I mean, Velini will have a lot to say about the worries caused to business people about money. And you have an emotional reaction to that. Now, you have a choice, don't you? You can become very negative about all that and be very upset about it, or you can start to manage that emotion and say, okay, I'm not happy with the lack of profit. So what am I going to do about it? I now need to sit down, and I've got to sit down with Velini or someone else, and they've got to help me. I hope that makes sense to people. Yes, it's all about the way we approach issues. COVID, there's no hiding place from COVID. We're all in it. We can manage COVID by being critical and blame others, or we can say, well, what am I going to do? I am going to wear a mask. I am going to get vaccinated. I am going to take responsibility for looking after myself. Now, that's emotional intelligence. That's about our willingness to manage our emotions. And once we can manage our emotions, guess what we can do? We can help other people manage theirs. And Velini and I are both coaches, and that's what we do. We coach people. But we can only do that if actually we can do this stuff for ourselves. There's a lot more to say on emotional intelligence, but I'm aware that Velini is sitting there very patiently. So do you want me to do a little bit of a summary on emotional intelligence, Velini? And then you come in. Did you hear that?
Yes, please. Please.
Okay. So just summarizing in terms of the 3 E's, emotions.
It's kind of bits and pieces, but I can continue.
Okay. That's life, isn't it? Life is bits and pieces. It's the bits and pieces of our emotions. Yes. So emotions, empathy, emotional intelligence, your ability to manage your emotions. So emotional intelligence, 5 steps, very quickly. We become aware of our emotions. as we become aware of them, we can motivate ourselves. We can say to ourselves, look, I get angry too quickly here. That's not good. It's not good for me. It's not good for the people around me. I've got to do something about this. But I'm only going to do that if I can be aware myself. Then we can start to manage our emotions. Then we become more empathetic, because the minute I can manage mine, I can understand somebody else's, and then I can help them. But don't think that you're going to be of any help to anybody else if you can't manage your own emotions. You won't be a help to your loved ones or to your kids or to your staff until you start to manage your own emotions. And that's why this stuff is really important. And it's really important for all of us. And it's even more important in today's world. So I was going to finish with talking about an image of an iceberg, but I'll do that next time. Velini, over to you to finish off. Your turn.
Thank you, Chris. So I hope you are all hearing me fine. Chris has touched on a lot about emotions, and I hope you all learned something from it, and to take it on to the current crisis that we're in. It's all about us having a positive mindset in order to manage the emotions around us, and our emotions and the people around us. So just an encouragement to all. Continue to practice positive mindset, and if it helps, try empathy. Empathy is understanding other situation, putting your shoes in other situation, like Chris mentioned. So I think that pretty much covers up. Chris really summarized the topic to do with emotion, and I think it pretty much covers everything that we need to discuss on emotions. Thank you, Chris, for taking on this and covering all the things that we need to cover in this session. I'm sorry that my connection is still a bit crazy, but thank you again, and I hope all our viewers are pleased with what we have discussed today.
Thank you, Velini.
So we'll be coming back again next week. And sorry, not next week. It's on Thursday. We're coming back on Thursday at 5 p.m. and we're still going to be talking about emotions. And this time we'll be talking about how we can negotiate using the emotions that we have. Yeah.
Yes. It's going to be that's a really important topic. I mean, business is full of negotiations. Yeah? Negotiate with customers, negotiate with landlords, negotiate with suppliers, negotiate with all sorts of people, and they are all emotional activities. So that's on Thursday. And we'll deal with our emotions about the technology. Have a good evening, everybody. I think we probably if we hold on a minute and see if Velini comes back, but my guess is maybe not this time. Please send us in comments. You're more than welcome to contact us. You can do that through Espresso Magazine. If anyone's got any particular issues you want to talk about that you don't necessarily want to talk about in public, but that relate to these topics, because some of this is quite personal, the stuff we're talking about, feel free. You can contact us. It's all confidential. Feel free to talk to us. So that's it for me. Thank you. And thank you very much, Velini. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.